All right, yeah. Welcome, everybody, and the viewers to Indie Podcast. I'm Shiro Nobunaga, and with us today, co-host Mehreen, the sultry oracle. Brought to you by Guided Soul-ution. We just want to welcome all the viewers on Twitch and YouTube viewers as well. We welcome you to the world of In Deep, where we go deep into the topic of esoteric people and places to tell the story of the ancient souls as well. So, Mehreen, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Shiro. Excited to get deep.
Oh,
yeah. Deep. Going deep, all the deeps.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for your beautiful feedback from our first episode. As you notice, now we have this beautiful music in the background, produced and written by Michael Martinez of User One Music at User One Music. And also today, this is all produced by Lost Cause Media and Creative Box Studio in Ontario. So today, I felt compelled to talk about a topic that came up on a follow-up email that I did with a client. And I felt like it was a topic that was really just strong. Feels like right now we're all going through sort of the reflective phase, right? We're coming into the second half of the year, and there's a lot of the build-up, but at the same time, a lot of closures. And one of the things that was kind of coming up, certainly ancestral healing was definitely coming up. Family healing also was prominent as well. And the topic of forgiveness seems to be very common. And also at the same time, I felt like forgiveness, the topic, and even the word itself, deserve to go in deep. So what comes to mind for you? Well, first of all, I want to just share, by the way, what prompted and the question that I received from the client. So if we can have that up on the screen as well. So she had wrote several questions, but one of the topics she said, peacemaking. How do I make peace or forgive the people who wronged me? And in that sense, do I have to make them aware, or this is more for me? And I thought that was a very powerful question, I think. I think that just for someone to take the initiative to ask that question or seek that the answer to that question, I felt strong admiration and respect for that as well. So that is the prompt. What comes to mind for you?
I mean, for me, forgiveness, it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way, because, if I want to forgive somebody, it means I want to let go and bring closure to some sort of topic or issue and move past it.
Yeah.
But what if that person isn't sorry or hasn't changed their ways? I mean, for me, I've definitely had to learn to just let go, regardless of whether I feel like they have learned the lesson or realize how much they've hurt me. I can't hinge my closure on somebody else. It really has to come from within.
So are you generally a forgiving person, do you think?
I honestly don't know. I can hold a grudge like no other. And I can be pretty spiteful at times too. So I think I like the way it feels to be a little angry at times and to hang on to that fire of, just, I can't believe this person wronged me. Yeah. But eventually I get to a point where I'm like, okay, putting any more energy into this is hurting me. They don't care, clearly. So I have to just walk away from it.
That's interesting. I love that you said that, because that's something that I didn't even think of addressing, but it is true that sometimes we love the drama, right?
I love drama.
We love the different savoriness of human emotion. And I think that what a wonderful way to be introspective is that you kind of almost even are not only aware, but can enjoy that little sensation of anger and drama and sulking and all of that. So One of the things that I definitely wanted to go in deep on is the definition of the word forgiveness, or to forgive. And one that, of course, let's start with what is conventionally explained or described in the dictionary. So the dictionary definition of forgiveness, or forgive, the verb, is to stop feeling angry or resentful toward, in parentheses, someone, for an offense, flaw, or mistake. And some of the other words, other expressions that also kind of signifies that energy will be pardon, exoneration, absolve, excuse, acquit. And one of the things that as I was looking at that, I was realizing that this word in and of itself cannot be self-contained. In other words, it has a lot of layers, and it depends on the narrative or paradigm, or in sort of our terminology, consciousness of a dimensional level of consciousness. So that's something that I want to go into as well. That forgiveness means and looks and feels different for everyone. But how do you, by the way, before we also get into that, how do you usually feel or become aware that you're holding, I guess, the grudge?
I mean, it's definitely just the way I feel, it's like when my heart just feels heavy and I have that pit at the bottom of my stomach. And usually at that point, I'm not even thinking about forgiveness. It's just, oh, this is how I feel. Clearly, I'm so out of touch with my emotions at times. So, I mean, I usually just get to that point where I am now aware of this feeling, and you hang out, you listen to all of the moody music and watch all of the sad movies, and you wallow, and then I'm like, okay, I'm tired of feeling this way. Can I try to move past this? And a part of me doesn't even like the word forgiveness, because it has this duality to it of to forgive, it means there's something to forgive, versus it just all being part of the experience. And when you have to forgive something, it's got this negative implication. But there's so many negative things that have happened to me that have been for like my greatest good. So at this point, I'm just trying to welcome all of it and feel what I feel, and then hopefully move out of feeling those lower vibrations.
Yeah. Again, you're putting a lot of nuggets out there in regards to how we're triggered, and all of that as well. We'll definitely get into that. So let's break down like different dimensional levels of how we perceive and how we become aware, right? So first, definitely, because we have that layers, not just the dimensional consciousness, but we can say it in another way, like we have the emotional body, the etheric body, so every level of who we are also feels different things. Historically as well, some things are more deeply rooted from childhood, and then we even go further to past lives. There are things that we hold or harbor that isn't necessarily about anyone. We don't know what it is that we're holding this unforgiveness or grudge or this knot toward, but it is definitely something that's unresolved. So on a state of or lack of forgiveness or unforgiveness is also like a knot, sense of stuckness. What are other sensations that come to mind?
I mean, just feeling that sorrow, maybe if it was a specific event, being unable to stop replaying that over and over in your head. I know for me, I have such a great memory. So it's like, I'll forgive, but I never forget, right? Like you think you move past something, but when you pull up the memory again, you're like, oh God, I'm being stabbed in the heart. So, it's definitely, it's got the layers to it for sure.
Yeah. So like, from on a physical level, what we would usually call the three-dimensional, right? The level where we're just looking at the flesh, looking at you and me, looking at the world. We kind of see the forgiveness is associated to a lot of victimization, state of blame, responsibility, or owning up to, justice, punishment. That's all the very strong around the area of that topic. Anything comes to mind for you in that arena?
Yeah, I mean, it's the, I've been wrong, so how do I exact my revenge and make them feel what I'm feeling? I mean, I know growing up, I would fight with my sister terribly. I mean, usually it would be my fault. I would steal her clothes and makeup, and then she'd be mad at me, and then I would just like say things back to her that were so hurtful to make her feel my pain. It's this weird sort of terrible road to fostering empathy in somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because I guess the idea of getting even is in that particular field feels like a resolution.
Feels like it's balanced, like
Balanced,
okay, the pendulum has swung back, and now they know how I feel. And for me, like if I'm arguing with somebody, I'm trying to get better at beating the dead horse of like, but do you understand where I'm coming from? Do you feel what I'm feeling? But that sort of justice of now you know what you've done.
At that level, like, so at that I hate to say level, at that on that field, I guess, you're not the word forgiveness isn't really a prominent word, right? That's very introduced through perhaps religion. It's definitely much more of an emotional intelligence level kind
Compassion.
It's a vocabulary doesn't just pop up. Getting even, getting punished, apologizing, maybe the apology is huge, right? That's definitely something. So in that field, forgiveness is often achieved by the getting even. Being understood, I guess, will be one. You said, I want to make you understand how that made me feel. Then it pretty much stops there, correct?
I mean,
at that
still, I'm a
point.
work in progress. Even having that attachment to the other person of having them understand how I feel, I'm outsourcing that ability to move on. But I mean, usually for me, the hashing it out and understanding their point of view and vice versa, and then having some sort of resolution of, okay, we're both going to agree to show up and work on whatever the issue was. If that intention is there, then it's easier for me to let it go. I wouldn't say it's like 100%. I don't feel the emotion that's attached to the original incident anymore.
Right.
But it's definitely a forward move.
Right. So the resolution helps it. That is a form of peacemaking, I guess, as well. Then something happens, it gets triggered and it resurfaces.
I love triggers.
Yeah.
Can't escape them.
And you go, oh, okay, it's still there. Okay. But at that on that playing field, really that's pretty much as far as you can go, right? It's all about either the evenness, getting even, what else we were talking about, sort of the of course some kind of justice.
I mean, I think I hopefully moved past that one, that need for revenge and, staying in that lower space of, okay, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. But it's definitely like one of the early phases. Like, I feel like children are always in that, you hurt me, well, I'm going to shove you back into the sandpit.
Right.
And it's just this cycle that keeps going.
Yeah.
But I really, at this point, the intention with the other person of them acknowledging, like just being acknowledged and feeling seen and heard, that really does a lot. That helps to get on that road of just being able to let it go.
That makes sense. So in the end, on that three-dimensional understanding, forgiveness is definitely what of course the dictionary was defining as it's sort of the just letting go of the anger or resentment. Pardoning is a huge thing, right? You are giving that person that acquittal, right? Like the law, right? The civil.
So official sounding.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if I want to give them a free pass.
Or excusing them, right? That's another one, right? But when we begin to now dive into a higher dimensional consciousness, the narrative or the definition, we can begin to see another layer opens. So I kind of, again, just very general kind of way that I'm expressing, so it's not a technical accuracy of any type, but so when I take it to the sort of the fourth dimensional understanding of or how we see forgiveness, there's this understanding and acceptance of the importance of forgiveness. That's the first thing that we begin to awaken to, is that, wow, I still feel this angst or anger or this bitterness or even this wound or sting, but I recognize the importance of forgiveness. For me, I grew up Christian, and I grew up, Jesus forgiving the sins, that how we must forgive one another. It's just taught that way. One thing in my youth I remember vividly thinking was, yeah, but how does that work?
How do you get there?
It's like love, right? It's like because I'm such a, I want to understand the mechanism. I want to understand how everything works. I love breaking things apart and, kind of trying to fix it even though it's not broken, just to see how it works. So I remember, how does forgiveness work? But the importance of forgiveness is acknowledged. It's just an instinctive understanding. Need for closure is something that you begin to also become aware of. And the other thing is that now there's the empathy is starting to also sprout in the consciousness level, where you begin to also understand the other person's story, and also you also begin to view it as your own lesson.
Which is really frustrating. I'm just smiling because I'm like, I'm there now at this point where I'm like, it takes the steam out of an argument. You know, it's like, oh, I want to rage on this person all night long, and I can't, because I can also kind of see where they're coming from too.
That's, and I don't know, and I guess that's one thing that I was able to really evolve through, perhaps before this incarnation, but I've always had an innate ability to forgive. I remember my ex, amidst our fight, just blurted out like, well, you're gonna forgive me anyway. Because being a forgiving person apparently was a very strong suit or character that I didn't necessarily think anything of, but I'm more of the, I'm sure you can relate, I flare up, but I let it out and I'm done. I don't
think I let it out enough, which is the problem. Which now
is that what it is?
I'm embracing. I mean, I used to be upset in the past, and then just, tuck it away inside and compartmentalize. And then it would be 20 instances of that, and then all of a sudden I would just completely explode and have a psychotic break. And I mean, not really, but it's like, where did that come from? And so at this point, I'm just, it's like the Instapot, it just has like the little pressure release valve, and it just kind of self-regulates. And maybe we can get sponsored by Instapot.
Forgiveness sponsored by Instapot.
But definitely releasing it as it comes is very important.
I think that even that comes with some level of permission. or allowance, correct?
From yourself to
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
That, why do we suppress, by the way? I'm going to start to veer off.
Yeah, I mean, well, growing up, like, just in my family,
Yeah.
you didn't complain. You know, if you did, it would just fall on deaf ears anyways. So you would just, now...
Was that cultural for you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
I think my culture was like that as well.
yeah, the similar, you know, Afghan, Indian, Asian
Right, Asian,
experiences.
yeah. You just don't show it. You can't.
A sign of weakness
Oh,
to show any
and shame.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, you're right. You know, even mourning process or anything like that, we think that we shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, when my dad died, I didn't even cry like the week leading up to the funeral, at the funeral, because everyone was over and
Yeah.
everyone was a mess. So I'm like, I need to be the strong one and carry everything. And then I didn't grieve for a decade, truly. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. So
Was that something that you consciously try to suppress or control?
a little bit of both. I definitely tried to just keep it under wraps, because you're like, if I give in to this, like, I don't know if I'll come out of it again. So it's easier just to not, you know, even show that weakness or show that emotion. It's like me with chips. Like, if I just open the bag and just think I'll have a few, I'll finish the entire bag. And so for me, grief was the same way. I'm like, if I emote a little bit, I don't know if I'll stop until all the hot Cheetos are gone. So, yeah.
That's interesting. That's a very good point. And something that I probably want to get into on the second episode. But so in other words, in some ways, forgiveness can be about the allowance of expression of the anger
Or the whatever emotion.
or
the
whatever
betrayal,
emotion that you feel.
I feel like that's really the first step, to even just acknowledge that you are hurt.
That's beautiful.
It's especially for women, we're always pigeonholing our feelings and emotions, and oftentimes we don't even know how we feel about something, because it's sometimes a luxury and it shouldn't be. But yeah, I mean, feeling it all. You know, I have a friend going through some deep personal stuff right now with her partner, and I'm just like, go yell, go scream, go stand on the edge of a cliff and just shout into the wind and feel it, because you're justified in all of these emotions. But if you try to bottle them up to keep everything nice and organized, you know, emotionally, it'll explode.
You know, that would be, and I'm probably still trying to understand the true definition of that word, but emotional intelligence, would that be emotional intelligence? That
I mean,
that
it's
you're
being
able to talk about it,
aware,
address
yeah.
it, become aware of it?
I would say so.
Yeah, okay. So then that's something that I think that men overall are actually quite challenged with. And
I think we
kind
all
of
are,
heard
yeah.
like emotional intelligence is not as developed with men, right? Because the masculine energy demands everything to be linear, everything need to be analytically understood or logically understood.
Or be purposeful, you know?
Right.
And sometimes
Or
feeling grief,
application
it's like,
and
well, this
organization.
doesn't serve any good. So,
Right, okay, compartmentalization.
yeah,
So allowing oneself to feel
all of it.
will be a great challenge, especially
That
for,
is,
and I'm not
my
saying
go-to.
men, I guess it's just more of if anyone is masculine dominant, that usually becomes some of the natural phenomena or common phenomena that you begin to disassociate from your own feelings.
You know, maybe that's just being human, because I definitely do that too. And I have so many friends and, you know, girlfriends who will also just not feel all of it. So if anybody's in that moment of just anger, sadness, rage, jealousy, feeling low or depressed, it's like, just feel it all out, because whether or not you recognize it, it's there. And either you can let it out in a way that you can somewhat be aware of and control in some fashion, or it'll fester and start to crop up with how you interact with people or self-sabotage. It's there, like it or not. So might as well look at it head on.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. And that kind of reminds me of how generally we we look down upon or consider it to be shameful or embarrassing. That's kind of almost universal, regardless of cultural background. To be able to express or to be in touch with that aspect of it, or to be able to to express that is generally considered unsophisticated or embarrassing.
Or weak, or I mean,
why is that?
There's so much stoicism in the world, and it's just a disservice because, we're humans and we feel such a range of emotions, and, we can't just keep it all buttoned up. Like, I really feel like at some point it will come out in some fashion. So, yeah, I mean, I'm actually just inspired by my boyfriend constantly because we'll be watching a movie and, we're cuddling. Then I feel splashing on my face and I look up and he's tearing up and I'm like, oh God, like, should I cry? Is it okay if I cry? And like, I've literally thought this, like, is it okay to show emotion? And it's so beaten into us that you must appear strong. And, even if your world is falling apart. Oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and my like personal upbringing was, first gen of like immigrant parents and they really dealt with a lot of shit just getting over here.
Yeah.
And so, I feel that at times they didn't have the luxury of feeling their feelings because it's okay, we've got to just get by and you've got to do the hard things and not really dissolve into a puddle of tears, when you lose somebody or when you have to leave your homeland. And it's now kind of convoluted with being strong. So, yeah.
What was your dad like? Well, between your mom and dad, if I may ask, which one was more of the expressive type?
They're both expressive in their own ways. Like my dad was very stoic, but he felt things very deeply. And he wouldn't necessarily flare up, with anger or be really lovey-dovey with somebody, but he felt all of those truly down to his core. But my mom, she will show everything, but then she's done with that emotion, and she doesn't necessarily feel it deeply, but it's just a strong pop. So, I think they both had their own ways of doing it.
Did they ever get to a point where they would yell or become physical in any way?
Definitely a lot of raised voices. They were loud people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with a very dynamic and at times quite violent, actually, before domestic violence was actually a recognized terminology. Because now, we overdiagnose everything. But back then, I think, my dad was definitely more of the yelling but I remember, because I think I was a little sensitive, to say the least. I remember being scared or intimidated, and at the times, and then of course as you grow older, and I'm like, I'm never going to be like my dad, but then I begin to realize more and more I'm like just like him in many ways. My mom was more of the very internalizing everything, sort of the passive aggressive in many ways, but unhealthy internalization, I think, is what it was, the epitome of that. So I grew up around that. I resented my dad for his temper for a long time, but then I also began to realize that, to appreciate that dynamic, because when he laughed loud.
He just felt it all.
Yeah,
deeply.
like, they had like a weekly mahjong, night at our home, and I'll be trying to, write songs or whatever, deep into the night, and they'll be playing, and all I can hear is my dad like, laughing, and but yet I remember feeling comforted that, there was this great time being had downstairs, kind of thing. And so, but yeah, looking back, now, though I appreciated my mother's sensitivity, I do admire, and I do see that it's really good for the soul to be able to express all aspects of your emotion, to cry hard, to laugh hard, to to be pissed off and to be passionate and all of that.
It's conscious, right? Truly we control how we feel and we can change it. But if we're not even aware of what it is that we're expressing or feeling,
right,
then how do we know that we even want to feel that way?
Yeah. So I think part of that forgiveness is to be able to express it enough that you become aware of your own feelings. And then that also begins to help us to activate the empathy to understand the other. Like for me, example, like as I started to embrace my own dynamic ways of emotional expression, I began to understand my father's kind of thing. Do you think that some of the forgiveness or sense of forgiveness that you arrived to is something that happened with your sense of embracing that about yourself? And then do you know an instance where that kind of connected to, oh wow, that's how that person was when that person did this to me, or whatever that maybe?
I mean, I think it's definitely an evolution. Excuse me. It's being aware of just even how I feel, and there was just so much time that's just passed where I would go through the motions of this is what I have to do to respond to a situation, and I wouldn't even take account of how that person made me feel, or how do I want to even respond to this. It would just be such a knee-jerk reaction. So being aware is kind of like the first step, or the way that I try to approach it. And then however I feel, if I feel the jealousy or the insecurity or the sadness, I honor it in a way. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I'm feeling it, like it or not, so might as well just try to look at it head on and get a lesson out of it.
When did that activate for you? I mean, because
the last year. I mean, it's so recent.
So how did, prior to that, were you taught about forgiveness in any way?
No.
Okay.
No.
When you fight with your sister, for example, what's your mom or dad's reaction to the fight? Like, how do they intervene?
My sister is such a strong personality. That usually my mom would just be like, just go say sorry, be the bigger person, apologize, and smooth it over. But most of the time it would be her fault anyways, right? I'm never in the wrong. But I would do that a lot. I mean, and with a lot of people too, because that was the sort of pattern that was established at that point of, even if you're not sorry, or, you don't feel like you actually did anything wrong, or you feel like you were just targeted in some way, you have to smooth it over and forgive, but you're not really forgiving. Now there's resentment of needing to peacemake when that person hasn't sort of owned up to their side of it. Yeah. So still unpacking that.
Do you apologize well? Do you have difficulty apologizing?
I would say I do at times.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'm...
How does that... When it's difficult, what is it? What makes it difficult for you?
It usually feels like kind of like a paradox in a way, because, like if I fight with my partner, I'm sorry that he is upset, and I'm sorry that I'm upset. Like, I'm sorry that the situation exists, but I still feel justified in how I feel. So it's like those two kind of exist at the same time. So it's not like I'm sorry, let's just erase this conversation.
Right.
But it's like, okay, I'm sorry that we're in this place of this vibration of feeling this. But that being said, I still feel this way.
Yeah.
So,
What's the tipping point that suddenly makes it easier to apologize?
Feeling like the other person is being sincere in the exchange. If they're being defensive or aloof, or not really acknowledging just where I'm coming from, or even trying to.
Yes.
It's like, okay, well, this is a closed door. I'm just talking to a wall, so they don't deserve my forgiveness. I'm just gonna go wallow somewhere else.
Right. So that's there's a lot of that mutual recognition that brings both forgiveness and apology to an easier path.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, like, I would let the most heinous, awful things just go. If that person was like, you know what, I get it. I get how I let you down.
Yeah.
But I'm aware of it now and I'm working on it. And for me, like, that's good enough. I would forgive just about anything at that point.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, that brings, me to the next kind of a thing that I wanted to kind of bring up in regards to forgiveness is this sense of victimization. Because I think that's where a lot of the hurdle is in regards to how we arrive to any type of peacemaking, is that we feel wronged. The original question that, this person had brought up, that what do I do to the, with the people that wronged me? And feeling victimized is something that many of us, if not all, at some point have experienced. Blame, sense of self-pity for that matter. These are also some of the symptoms of state of unforgiveness as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, even being able to forgive yourself for things that you've done.
Right, because even after you come to the place of understanding other people's situation, even if you are able to lift a sense of, even if you are able to not blaming others, if the blame is casted on yourself, it's still the same. Because in the end, why is it that we feel this great discomfort when we feel victimized?
I think we sense that we've just outsourced our power.
There you go.
We've lost our autonomy.
Powerful.
And
brilliant.
It's like, shit, that's not good. So,
yeah. Because we don't feel like we own it, right? When we begin to understand that at our deepest core of who we are, that we are in its original design, designed to own everything. It's not control, right? It's owning everything, which is really the equivalent of the word sovereignty. The sovereign state, to me, is a state where you own every aspect of your experience and who you are. And we are designed that way. We are designed to feel a sense of chipping away at that ownership just by the mere use of the word, I should do this. I'm supposed to forgive. I need to apologize. I must, or I have to, whatever. Right? All of this is externally driven. And with that, becomes this very difficult challenge of removing yourself from the sense of being victimized, because there's always this something. Well, of course, at the core, the base operating paradigm or system is life is happening to me, right? So all the way up to the fourth dimensional consciousness, there's, at least within the fourth dimensional consciousness, you're aware of what's the greater good. But the struggle is still happening because why? Lack of ownership is there, and therefore we feel like life is happening to me, to us. And what makes the state of blame so detrimental is because not only is it unnatural to our true core design, it is also because it removes us from that experience. It also greatly diminishes or completely deletes the value that we are able to extract for ourselves from that experience. In other words, there is no sense of learning of any type. So as we begin to shift into a higher consciousness, the acknowledgement of the need for ownership is there. And then the sense of what I kind of mentioned in the earlier sense of I need to recognize that this is a lesson for me. But even when we say lessons, it's still this like acknowledgement that we are lacking something, we need to learn something, we're improving something, we are starting at this very elementary level.
It's like that place is better than this place.
Yeah.
I need to level up in my understanding of things, which is true to an extent, but I think there's wisdom at all of the stages of it.
Do you recall when you made that shift into a little more of that sense of self-driven sense of I own this experience? What caused that shift for you?
I mean, truly just the last year with all of the shadow integration and, looking at the things that were running my life and just deciding that I was not okay with that, loss of autonomy. And yeah, I mean, I would say this is pretty recent. I'm still evolving, we're human becoming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We both touched on shadow work, on the part 2 of our previous episode of In Deep, where it was a derivative of the topic. The main topic was just toxic positivity, and you also led the group of our Sacred Circle with the topic of shadow work, and I really appreciated the vulnerability of how much you've gone through, and I think that is really powerful, right? The willingness to look into the shade of ourselves, to look into the areas of our lives that is often neglected, the stone that isn't unturned. So with that shadow work, do you think that really brought you to an ease of forgiveness or lifting of any sense of victimization?
I would say it's this upward spiral where there's moments where I feel like I've mastered this, and I'm up-leveled, and now I'm super conscious and woke, and I don't need to forgive because I'm never offended or hurt. But I mean, I still am a sensitive person at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's still a process, but yeah, being aware of just the triggers of, the things that I would think that I would have to forgive somebody for. I also try to treat it as a mirror, and I'm like, okay, well, why, do I need to forgive myself for this? I mean, and really the crux of all of my issues they all stem from just the self-love and being able to just love and accept myself and not need to forgive, but integrate all of it as this is just who I am.
Yeah.
And all aspects need that same compassion.
Yeah, that's what kind of segues into the sort of the next step, which is what I would label it as sort of the 5 or the 5th dimensional consciousness. So what differs when we begin to shift now from the 4th dimensional consciousness to the 5th dimensional consciousness? And again, the terminology is just semantics, really, it doesn't matter. There's another shift or where we begin to acknowledge the bigger picture, when we begin to see ourselves as part of the collective singularity, a sense of we are one, a part of the body, different parts of the body perhaps. And that's when forgiveness becomes more about the complete ownership of the divine script, the overview of the incarnation purpose, and the necessity of contrast to substantiate the value of light. Those are kinds of things that I kind of loosely kind of identified. What's the difference when we begin to, first it's just about we need to get even, it's justice, blame, I'm victimized, apologize and then we'll call it even, to, okay, I understand that forgiveness needs to come. I understand that I can't just wait for this person. But then there's still this forgiveness associating to the pardoning. That person is going to get away with this. They don't even, feel like they did anything wrong. But the need for closure is there. Also, we kind of summarized the empathy to understand, okay, but maybe this person was going through something too. Then we kind of go above another layer of clouds, and then we begin to see. This is when we begin to recognize that this is all a story of my own scripting, which is really the case in the end.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take such a deep dogmatic or theology or even any kind of spiritual or esoteric understanding. Just looking within our nature of who we are, just the base nature of how we want to own everything. We just don't want someone else to be doing it for us. We don't want to feel like someone else is driving it for us in terms of our lives, our choices, and so forth. That as long as I know that I did it because I wanted to do it, there's this fulfilling sense that even if it was a mistake, like there's better way of acceptance.
I mean, when does it get fulfilling? Because at this point, I'm like, my higher self is a sadist or a masochist. Like, why would I set this up for myself? And so I'm just like, now instead of lashing out at someone else or letting them, letting the forgiveness come, I'm like, fuck, why did I do this to myself? Like, what's the lesson here? So, yeah.
I know we joke. And I always say, like, I really strongly feel, and I know I'm not the only one who see this, that your previous life was definitely of some very high royalty. I see men servants. But you can see,
yeah,
the thing. You say this all the time. Oh, that's so boring, right? Don't you think that you were very bored living a life where everyone catered to you and you wanted to?
Clearly. I mean, I still love not having to do the dishes, so it's a balance now. Being human is fun.
I don't understand why you don't like doing dishes. I love doing dishes.
I could hang out on the couch and read a book instead.
Well, yeah.
Be fed grapes.
The sensation of the water flowing through your hand, knowing that this water is cleaning something off of the plate, and what was dirty becomes clean. Isn't that a fun process to watch?
No, because usually I'm the one cooking, so I've already been standing in the kitchen for hours.
You're right. No, I understand that. You love the creation. You are a creator. And that is absolutely, you're right. It's like me. I love playing, but I don't like the load in and the tear down.
Totally.
And, the
you just want to create.
Yeah, I don't like having to tune my restringing my guitar all the time, or whatever. So yeah, I understand. Where were we, by the way? So anyway, coming back to recognition, ultimately the highest point of view, I guess, the peak, or at least the where we can kind of begin to see things from a bigger perspective. You begin to understand that nothing is happening to you, that this is all a response to you. What you're putting out is what you're getting back. But even when I say that, because I remember I had a session yesterday where I was like, one of the law of the universe, one is that the only constant is change, and the other is what you put out is what you get back. And immediately this person was like, oh, it's my fault that this is happening to me. And I was like, okay, that's not where we're
not
going.
Swinging in the other direction.
Right. It's not about any sense of blame or even faulting. That the best expression is that you scripted this into your plot because you needed
having the trust in yourself.
Yeah.
Which is hard, when you're depressed or you're feeling hurt or betrayed.
Because
it's hard to see the purpose.
When we dip, we begin to lose the sense of power and sovereignty, so we feel powerless, which is usually when the victim sensation starts to sink in. Really, right? Because even in the relationship between bullies and those who get bullied, the common ground is that they're both in the state of powerlessness. One just wants to try to be active or proactive in wanting to feel the sense of power to reciprocate, whereas the other is just a sort of state of passiveness of that state of powerlessness. So when we do dip, that's definitely where the sensation is felt, right? We visit that sort of the lower end of the spectrum, so to speak. But yes, so from that point of view, I guess even the verb forgiving becomes sort of obsolete, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's, again, layers to the word and the definition, but I try to just see it all as positive, even feeling sad or betrayed. Sometimes it's a great catalyst for, forward movement.
Yeah.
And so, why do I want to forgive and let go of something that actually has been really helpful? But that being said, grudges and being spiteful and feeling resentful, no one needs to hang out there. You just have to kind of accept and detach from it somewhat,
right. Yeah, because what does detachment do, right? It gives
What doesn't it do?
Yeah, it gives you, it puts you in the state of more of the unconditional love, where you look at it for what it is, not for what you want it to be anymore. So that's kind of something that I wanted to really dive deep into today, because I felt like forgiveness, the word in and of itself, I don't use it in the session, even when that is maybe what it's called for. I break it down in different ways so that we're not using that word, because it is, that word, though is beautiful in many ways, it is very limiting as well, and it really does pigeonhole the sort of the depth of it, I guess, So as we close our first episode on forgiveness, I do want to share the response that came to me in regards to what the client asked. And this is the response I got that came to me to the question of peacemaking. How do I make peace or forgive the people who wronged me? And in that sense, do I have to make them aware, or this is more for me? And the answer was, as long as you view that people have wronged you, the seeking of solutions outside of yourself will never end. And it is at times useful in aiding with our sense of closure. Forgiveness essentially is about our own self-liberation.
Beautiful.
And when we own our portion of the experience as our own personal script, we release the violators from the field, and they become fully steeped in their own shit, and karma begins to play out for them to the extent that they're not acknowledging, embracing, accepting their own part. And this is why when we fight or resist something, it usually perpetuates, right? What we resist persists. For example, bullies get off on your response of saying, don't, stop it. But if you ignore them or you overpower them with confidence, happiness, or love, they eventually disappear. Energy of forgiveness is similar in this way. When we own our pain as our unique and personal healing and integration, scripted prior to birth for ourselves, then we step out of the victim mindset and step back into sovereignty. And that's really, though it may sound in some ways very technical, I guess, or deep, really it is very simple. When we begin to realize that we're not just here by accident, we're not a random existence, that everything is working in tandem with one another, and that there's a story being written out, that we are borrowing one another to trigger, to inspire, to ignite. Just like how today we were setting up the lighting, and how we were using the colors, the light, the shade, the contrast to create this beautiful appearance that Mehreen is today. Not that she needs any of the extra lighting to look this beautiful, but how lighting is the lifeline for photographers and pictures, how oil painters, start with a white canvas, which is sort of the equivalence of light, but how can we understand that it is light until that contrasting color of shade begins to be to enter the canvas in a contrast, creates that contrast. When we begin to understand that light and shade is equally valuable, then it really becomes forgiveness is just a gateway, and also eventually is not necessarily the focal point. You kind of always, time to time today, mention the word integration. And really, that's a very powerful word. And I'm sure we'll go in deep with that on another day. But I think integration is something also that is equivalent to, something that supersedes, or something that is more of the macro picture of what healing represents as well. So that's kind of something that I wanted to today really dive into today, episode number 1 of Forgiveness for In Deep. We want to thank all the viewers out there on Twitch and YouTube for joining us for this episode number 1. Thank you, Mehreen, for sharing a lot of your personal and beautiful story. Once again, thank you for Lost Cause Media for production, and Creative Box Studios in Ontario, and Michael Martinez for the beautiful music at User1 Music. We will come back and regroup for episode number 2 on forgiveness here on In Deep.